The Critics' Choice Celebration of Black Cinema and TV Gala is supposed to be a night of glamour, recognition, and celebration, a moment where the stars of the entertainment world gather to honor the achievements of Black filmmakers, actors, and creators. But last night, the spotlight turned into something entirely different. A scene unfolded on the red carpet that no one could have anticipated, a scene that would leave whispers and gasps in its wake. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, known around the world for her royal pedigree and Hollywood career, found herself at the center of a controversy that no one was prepared to witness. Imagine arriving at a high-profile event where the cameras are flashing, the photographers are calling your name, and the press is waiting to capture your every step, and then being told, quite literally, that you are not welcome. Security guards stepping in, not to guide or assist, but to remove you from the very space you had just entered. How does that happen? Why would anyone, anywhere, deny Meghan Markle access to a glamorous celebration meant for the most prominent figures in the industry? But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. The answers are not simple. This is not a story about a wardrobe malfunction or a scheduling mix-up. No, what unfolded last night taps into layers of Hollywood politics, cultural power dynamics, and the ever-complicated world of celebrity scrutiny. The gala was supposed to be a night of celebration, yet what emerged instead was a vivid tableau of tension, exclusion, and whispered accusations. It was a reminder, perhaps more stark than any social media post or tabloid headline could convey, that in the worlds of glitz and influence, not everyone is embraced. Even if the cameras seem to suggest otherwise. To understand what happened, we need to start at the beginning. Picture the scene. The gala, held in a grand Los Angeles ballroom, buzzing with energy and anticipation. Red carpets stretched like rivers of velvet, dotted with the glittering presence of stars. Bright lights gleamed off sleek dresses, tailored suits, and designer shoes. The air smelled faintly of perfume, champagne, and excitement, each bubble of champagne reflecting the golden light and the high expectations of the night. Attendees exchanged smiles, greetings, and compliments. This was the 8th annual Critics' Choice Celebration of Black Cinema and TV, a high-profile event designed to uplift voices and stories too often overlooked by mainstream Hollywood. Yet among the celebration, one figure would find herself isolated, scrutinized, and ultimately, forcibly removed. The story of Meghan's entrance began quietly. At first, she was just another celebrity on the red carpet, albeit a celebrity whose presence naturally drew attention. Cameras turned in her direction. Flashbulbs ignited. The murmurs began. A few heads turned, eyebrows raised slightly. Some whispers were admiring, curious about her dress, her makeup, her aura. But others carried a different tone. There was a subtle tension, almost imperceptible at first, but growing heavier with each step she took. Observers described a shift in the atmosphere, a collective recognition that this was more than just a star arriving. This was someone whose presence carried complex narratives, royalty, Hollywood fame, and a history of public controversies. It was a combination that, for some attendees, seemed incompatible with the intimacy and purpose of this particular gala. By the time Meghan reached the main entrance, the situation had escalated. Security personnel, who initially appeared merely to monitor the crowd and ensure safety, began positioning themselves strategically. Some were at the door, some along the velvet ropes, scanning and communicating with each other in short bursts of code and gestures. Their movements were almost imperceptible to the untrained eye, but the atmosphere was thickening. Guests who were already inside began to exchange confused glances. The energy of the night, supposed to be celebratory, was turning taut, like a string pulled too tight. It was clear that what was about to happen was neither planned nor ordinary. And then, the moment came. Security approached Meghan with a sense of urgency that was impossible to ignore. Not a polite greeting, not a friendly escort. This was a firm, deliberate intervention. Witnesses described the scene as surreal. Cameras captured flashes, but many of the most important moments were blocked from view, obscured by the crowd and the sudden, tense movements. A murmur swept through the attendees. What's happening? Why is she being stopped? The murmurs grew into whispers and gasps, the kind that ripple across a room and infect the air with curiosity, suspicion, and a touch of fear. Imagine standing there, expecting to be part of a celebrated evening, only to realize that your very presence has been questioned, challenged, and ultimately rejected. That was Meghan Markle's experience, condensed into a few excruciating minutes that would dominate headlines and social media the following day. But the drama of the night was not confined to the red carpet. Backstage, sources suggest, the tension was even higher. Staff members whispered about prior communications, unclear instructions, and conflicting reports. Who had authorized Meghan's exclusion? Was this an impulsive decision by security acting independently, or was it the result of a calculated move by someone higher up in the event's organization? Rumors circulated quickly, fueled by the presence of insiders and attendees with their own perspectives and agendas. The intrigue grew more complex when social media lit up with posts from guests, some condemning the treatment, some questioning Meghan's intentions, and others speculating on the broader implications for Hollywood, celebrity culture, and Meghan's ongoing public narrative. It was, in many ways, a perfect storm, a high-profile celebrity, a highly visible event, and a combination of social, cultural, and political forces colliding. And yet, for all the attention and speculation, no clear explanation was immediately available. Meghan herself remained largely silent, adding another layer to the intrigue. In a world dominated by instant reactions, statements, and viral videos, her silence only fueled the story. Questions multiplied. Was she deliberately excluded? Did she overstep some unspoken boundary? Was this the result of envy, cultural gatekeeping, or something far more strategic? And while the event organizers worked behind the scenes to control the narrative, the public response was already taking shape. Social media platforms became battlegrounds for opinion, speculation, and outrage. Memes spread rapidly, commentary threads exploded, and video clips circulated widely, some edited for dramatic effect, others capturing raw, unfiltered moments. Public sentiment was split, with some expressing sympathy for Meghan, others questioning her presence, and yet others dissecting every angle for deeper meaning. It became clear that this was more than a simple incident at a gala. This was a flashpoint, a moment that would reverberate far beyond the walls of the ballroom, shaping conversations in Hollywood, royal circles, and global media for days to come. And yet, even as speculation raged, one question remained unanswered. What happened inside that room, beyond the glare of the cameras and the red carpet lights? What did Meghan experience as she faced this unexpected rejection? How did the decision to remove her unfold? And who were the key players behind it? There are whispers of private conversations, urgent phone calls, and a tension that escalated in ways the public never saw. Insiders hint at shocking interactions that could redefine how we understand the dynamics of Hollywood access, celebrity privilege, and public perception. Every answer seems to open a new question, every revelation a new layer of complexity. The Critics Choice Gala was meant to honor achievement, to celebrate progress, to shine a light on those who have broken barriers and created remarkable stories. Instead, it became the backdrop for one of the most talked-about celebrity moments of the year. A moment defined not by accolades, but by exclusion, tension, and unanswered questions. And while the public watches, debates, and forms opinions, the truth behind the incident remains just out of reach, tantalizingly close yet frustratingly obscured. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The Critics' Choice Celebration of Black Cinema and TV Gala is not just another awards night. It's an event that Hollywood insiders circle on their calendars months in advance, a gathering that promises glamour, recognition, and influence in equal measure. It's a stage where careers can be subtly launched, alliances quietly solidified, and reputations either burnished or challenged. To understand why Meghan Markle's unexpected removal shocked everyone, we first need to grasp the magnitude of the event itself. This gala isn't about red carpets alone. It's about the power dynamics hidden behind them, the silent negotiations, the glances that convey far more than words ever could. From the outset, the energy was electric. The ballroom was transformed into a visual feast. Sweeping chandeliers cast a golden glow, velvet drapes framed the walls, and tables gleamed with meticulously arranged floral centerpieces. Photographers lined the entrance, cameras clicking in rapid staccato bursts, capturing every twirl of a gown, every confident step in a polished pair of shoes. There was an unspoken understanding among the guests. This was not merely an event, it was a stage, and everyone present was performing, even in the simplest gestures of greeting one another. Attendees arrived in a parade of elegance. Each outfit told a story. Bold colors signaling confidence, minimalist designs signaling refined taste, jewelry hinting at alliances, and in some cases, even subtle nods to cultural heritage. For some, this was an opportunity to shine individually. For others, it was a moment to quietly network, to observe who was gaining influence, and to position themselves strategically in a world where visibility can mean everything. The importance of the evening extended beyond the accolades themselves. It was about perception, access, and the intricate ballet of Hollywood politics. Amid this scene, Meghan Markle's arrival was naturally a focal point. Her presence was guaranteed to draw attention, given her global profile and the complicated narratives surrounding her both in Hollywood and the royal sphere. Yet before she even stepped onto the red carpet, murmurs had already begun. Some attendees expressed excitement, seeing her as a bridge between Hollywood and royalty, someone whose unique background could add glamour and attention to the gala. Others, however, harbored skepticism, questioning whether her presence fit the intimate and culturally focused nature of the evening. Backstage, the tension was already palpable. Event coordinators, aides, and security personnel moved briskly, each step carefully choreographed to maintain order in a space that teetered between chaos and spectacle. The arrival schedule, while meticulously planned, began to feel fragile as whispers about Meghan's presence circulated among staff, who had cleared her attendance. Were there specific instructions about where she could go and whom she could meet? These questions were more than procedural. They carried subtle power implications, hinting at unspoken hierarchies and potential conflicts that could arise if any misstep occurred. Meanwhile, the red carpet outside the main ballroom offered its own theater of anticipation. Celebrities posed, laughed, and waved for the cameras, each moment a carefully curated performance for an audience of millions, both present and virtual. Journalists scribbled notes, capturing impressions that would later form the headlines and viral social media posts of the following morning. Fans and bystanders craned their necks to catch a glimpse of their favorite stars, unaware that a storm was brewing that would eclipse even the most memorable outfits and speeches of the night. And then, Meghan arrived. Her entrance, like the rest of the evening, was calculated yet carried an undeniable weight of unpredictability. Flashbulbs ignited in rapid succession, illuminating her face, her gown, and the poised confidence she carried. But almost immediately, the atmosphere shifted. Eyes turned, not all in admiration. A few glances carried skepticism. Some, barely perceptible, carried judgment. In the intimate corridors of Hollywood influence, subtle signals speak louder than grand gestures, and it was clear that her presence was being quietly contested. Observers noted that while the cameras focused on her elegance, there was a tension beneath the surface. Security personnel moved with an almost imperceptible urgency, adjusting positions and communicating in hushed tones. Event staff exchanged glances, brief nods conveying instructions that would never be made public. Guests inside the ballroom, noticing the sudden change in energy, murmured among themselves, a ripple of curiosity spreading throughout the room. What was happening? Why did an air of unease accompany her entrance, when the night was supposed to celebrate inclusion, recognition, and achievement? It was at this point that the complex dynamics of Hollywood and celebrity culture collided. This was not merely a matter of etiquette or schedule. It was a reflection of larger forces: public perception, cultural sensitivity, and strategic positioning. Meghan's presence, rather than simply adding glamour, became a lightning rod for anxieties and unspoken conflicts. The gala, an event ostensibly designed to honor achievement and foster connections, suddenly became a theater for tension, with Meghan at its center. Every step she took was watched, analyzed, and subtly evaluated, not just by the media, but by insiders whose influence often dictated the flow of Hollywood narratives. The ballroom itself offered a striking contrast to the red carpet. Inside, the space was both grand and intimate, designed to foster a sense of community among the industry's luminaries, while simultaneously celebrating individual achievements. Tables were arranged to maximize visibility and conversation. Lighting was carefully controlled to highlight both the attendees and the decor, and every detail, from the silverware to the floral arrangements, contributed to an atmosphere of meticulous elegance. In this environment, presence carried immense significance. Seating, access to key figures, and proximity to the stage were all markers of status, subtly signaling influence and connection. For Meghan, whose presence was already contentious, navigating this landscape required not just poise, but a careful awareness of the complex web of relationships surrounding her. As the night progressed, the tension continued to build. Observers noticed subtle interactions. Whispers exchanged between security and staff, discreet hand signals, and occasional glances toward Meghan that seemed laden with unspoken messages. The energy of the gala, while outwardly celebratory, was underlined by a growing sense of anticipation, as if everyone was holding their breath for a moment that could redefine the evening entirely. And in the midst of it all, Meghan remained visible, poised, and composed, even as the currents of tension swirled around her. Yet the critical moment was still to come. While the gala had begun as an event of recognition and celebration, the undercurrents of Hollywood politics, cultural considerations, and personal perceptions were converging in ways that no one could have fully predicted. The stage was set not just for the awarding of accolades, but for a dramatic confrontation that would captivate audiences around the world. By the time security made their approach, by the time whispers turned into questions and gasps, the dynamics of the night had already been irreversibly altered. And just as the first signs of intervention began to unfold, a thought rippled across the room. What happens when the most powerful guests in the room, celebrities, insiders, and influential organizers, must confront a situation they never expected? How do social hierarchies, unspoken rules, and cultural expectations collide in a moment charged with tension? These are the questions that define the night, and they set the stage for the shocking sequence that would soon unfold, one that no attendee, no journalist, and no audience member watching from afar would forget. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. When Meghan Markle stepped onto the red carpet for the Critics' Choice Celebration of Black Cinema and TV Gala, the atmosphere seemed electric, almost unnaturally so. Cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing every step, every turn of her gown, every subtle expression that crossed her face. For most celebrities, a red carpet arrival is a moment to shine, to showcase fashion, to smile and wave, to command attention in a controlled way. For Meghan, however, this was no ordinary entrance. Even before the evening began in earnest, her presence carried the weight of global attention, royal scrutiny, and Hollywood's unspoken rules, a trifecta of pressure few could navigate gracefully. From the first glance, it was clear that this wasn't just another gala. The security team, positioned along the velvet ropes, began to move subtly, adjusting their stance and scanning the crowd more keenly than usual. There were whispers among the press and a few attendees. "Do you see that? Something's different tonight." Others, unaware of the growing tension, continued to snap photos and smile for the cameras, oblivious to the storm brewing just beyond the lens. Meghan's demeanor remained poised, almost statuesque, but those closest could sense a faint tension beneath the polished exterior. Every step forward seemed to pull the energy of the room taut, a string stretched to its breaking point. The moment she arrived, the juxtaposition of glamour and tension became strikingly apparent. On one side, admirers and fans gasped at her elegance, marveling at the way she carried herself with a mix of confidence and ease. On the other, there were subtle but unmistakable signs of disapproval, averted gazes, crossed arms, and the occasional pointed whisper among event staff. It was as if the room itself was divided into factions. Those who welcomed her presence, those who questioned it, and those unsure where they stood. In high-profile events like this, perception is everything, and the room was acutely aware that Meghan's presence was both a spectacle and a test. Her choice of attire for the evening also drew commentary, though not all of it positive. The gown she wore was elegant, classic yet modern, perfectly suited for a gala of this caliber. Some praised her fashion sense, noting the subtle nods to Hollywood sophistication and royal elegance, but others interpreted the outfit as a statement too bold for the occasion. Was it merely a dress, or was it a deliberate declaration of presence and influence? In an environment where every detail is scrutinized, every accessory dissected, even the smallest choice can carry meaning far beyond its surface appearance. Meghan, as always, was walking a tightrope between admiration and criticism, elegance and provocation. And then there was the subtle choreography of the red carpet itself. Photographers jostled for the best angles, trying to capture her at the perfect moment. Guests adjusted their positions, ensuring they were either included in the frame or intentionally avoided. Event staff whispered urgent instructions into earpieces, coordinating positions, managing crowd flow, and anticipating every potential disruption. Meghan's arrival, while planned, had immediately become the focal point for a delicate balancing act, a test of composure under intense scrutiny. It was at this juncture that the first signs of tension became unmistakable. Security personnel, who had initially been stationed for crowd control, began to approach with a new purpose. Their movements were subtle but deliberate, almost imperceptible to the casual observer, but anyone attuned to the nuances of event management would have noticed the shift. Guests nearby exchanged quiet looks, sensing that something was about to happen, though no one could predict the magnitude of what was coming. The tension was not loud. It didn't need to be. In these moments, silence and subtle gestures can speak louder than words, and the room seemed to collectively hold its breath. Meanwhile, Meghan continued her walk along the red carpet, composed and dignified, her smile carefully measured, her eyes scanning the crowd in a way that suggested both awareness and control. But even as she maintained her poise, the energy around her became increasingly charged. Whispers began to circulate more rapidly, some questioning why security appeared unusually focused on her, others speculating about who might be behind this unspoken scrutiny. In Hollywood, rumors spread quickly, and in a room filled with influential figures, a single suggestion can escalate into a storm of speculation in mere moments. By the time she reached the entrance to the main ballroom, the situation had escalated further. Event staff communicated with urgent gestures, security personnel shifted positions, and a few high-profile guests glanced at each other, their expressions a mixture of concern and curiosity. It was clear that the night, which had begun as a celebration of achievement and excellence, was on the verge of a dramatic pivot. Meghan's presence had not gone unnoticed. It had become a catalyst for tension, a flashpoint that threatened to overshadow the event's intended purpose. Then came the critical moment. Security stepped forward. Not casually, not with a welcoming hand, but with deliberate, almost insistent movements. They positioned themselves in a way that subtly but unmistakably indicated a boundary, a line Meghan was not supposed to cross. Eyewitnesses later described the scene as surreal. Cameras flashing, guests whispering, and Meghan confronted with a physical barrier to her entry. The energy of the room shifted in an instant. Excitement and anticipation gave way to shock and confusion, and those present could sense that something unprecedented was unfolding. The reactions were immediate and intense. Attendees glanced at one another in disbelief, trying to process the unexpected turn of events. Photographers captured flashes of the interaction, but many of the most pivotal moments were obscured, hidden behind the throng of guests and the sudden movements of security. Social media, already buzzing with images and live updates, began to speculate, posting questions and rumors that would later ignite a storm of commentary. It was a moment that seemed almost cinematic in its drama, a clash of presence and authority played out against the backdrop of one of Hollywood's most glamorous nights. Even as Meghan faced this unexpected confrontation, her composure remained largely intact, though insiders later reported that she was visibly surprised and perhaps even hurt. It was a stark reminder that no matter how experienced or poised a public figure may be, moments like these carry emotional weight. Humiliation, confusion, and disbelief often arriving faster than the mind can process. Every second stretched, every motion scrutinized, and the room collectively waited to see how the situation would unfold. The tension of the moment also highlighted the complex dynamics at play behind the scenes. Was this an isolated decision by security personnel, or was it orchestrated by someone with influence over the gala, perhaps seeking to send a subtle message or assert control over the event? Hollywood is rife with power plays, and in an environment where reputation and perception are currency, even small gestures can carry outsized consequences. Meghan's confrontation with security was not just a logistical matter. It was a symbolic clash, one that would ripple across conversations and headlines for days to come. And yet, for all the speculation, one crucial element remained shrouded in uncertainty: Meghan's own perspective. How did she interpret the sudden obstruction? How did she process the shock of being challenged, publicly and unexpectedly, at an event meant to celebrate achievement and inclusion? Sources close to her would later describe a mix of incredulity and determination, a refusal to let the moment define her, even as it unfolded in real time before cameras, guests, and the world. As the crowd held its collective breath, the red carpet moment became a pivot point for the entire evening. The glamour and anticipation, the excitement and energy of the gala, were now intertwined with tension, drama, and uncertainty. The scene was set for the next phase of the evening, one that would further escalate the stakes, heighten the emotional intensity, and ultimately redefine how this gala would be remembered in the public consciousness. But what happened next would shift the narrative entirely, and the world would be watching. The first whispers began almost imperceptibly, like a low hum beneath the glamorous surface of the gala. At first, they were subtle, just a few words exchanged behind hands, the occasional glance that lingered a second too long, an eyebrow raised with an unmistakable hint of skepticism. Yet even in their quietness, these whispers carried a weight far greater than their volume suggested. They signaled the start of a growing tension, a wave of resistance that would ripple through the room and ultimately set the stage for the shocking events to come. In high-profile events like the Critics Choice Celebration of Black Cinema and TV Gala, first impressions are everything. Every guest's arrival is scrutinized, not just by the press or the cameras, but by fellow attendees whose influence often dictates the flow of the evening. Gossip travels faster than the clinking of champagne glasses. Opinions, once whispered, spread like wildfire, shaping narratives in ways that can define careers, friendships, and reputations. Meghan Markle, despite her poised demeanor and royal background, had inadvertently stepped into a web of these unspoken judgments. The whispers began with the staff. Event coordinators and backstage personnel noticed subtle shifts in body language, the slightest tightening of the lips, a hand covering a mouth in surprise. There was a sense among them that this was not a routine evening, not a typical red carpet entrance. One staffer later described the moment as a ripple of tension that seemed to spread before we even knew why. The murmurs, at first isolated, quickly found an audience, shared among those closest to the action. Soon, the whispers extended beyond staff, reaching influential attendees who could interpret them within the context of Hollywood's intricate social dynamics. It wasn't just about Meghan herself, it was about what her presence represented. Some attendees saw her as a bridge between the worlds of Hollywood and royalty, someone whose international fame could elevate the gala's profile. Others, however, viewed her as an intrusion, a figure whose visibility might overshadow the event's focus on celebrating Black talent and achievement. In these moments, perception is everything. Who belongs? Who doesn't? Even subtle questions like these carry enormous significance in spaces where social and cultural power intersects. The murmurs were not malicious at first, but they were undeniably questioning, probing the boundaries of inclusion and acceptance. As Meghan continued her approach, the whispers gained clarity. Observers began to speculate, connecting her presence to prior controversies, to media narratives, and to Hollywood's history of exclusivity. Is she supposed to be here? One attendee asked quietly to another, almost rhetorically. Did they clear this with the organizers? The tone was loaded, not just curiosity, but judgment, as if her very right to attend was being questioned. In Hollywood, inclusion is often provisional, granted only when the presence of a guest aligns with the desires and sensitivities of those already within the space. Meghan, with her unique combination of celebrity, royalty, and public scrutiny, was a figure whose presence naturally challenged those dynamics. The whispers began to influence others. Some guests, previously indifferent, now turned their attention, watching Meghan with heightened interest. Every step she took was dissected. Her expression, her posture, the way she interacted with staff. Observers noticed the subtle interplay between confidence and tension, poise and vulnerability. It was a live performance under extraordinary scrutiny, and the whispers acted as a lens, magnifying every detail, every microexpression, every potential misstep. In a room full of influential figures, a whisper can ripple outward, influencing behavior, shaping perceptions, and ultimately directing the course of an evening. Meanwhile, the staff and security personnel exchanged urgent glances. They were trained to manage crowds, to protect guests, and to ensure that events proceed smoothly. But tonight, the script had changed. The whispers had escalated into something more tangible. Questions about access, concerns about protocol, and subtle disagreements about how to handle the situation. Event organizers reportedly debated quietly whether to intervene or allow the moment to unfold organically. In high-pressure events, such moments are fraught with risk. Every decision carries consequences, both visible and invisible. As the tension mounted, the whispers became almost conspiratorial. Guests speculated not just about protocol, but about intent. Was someone deliberately orchestrating resistance to Meghan's attendance? Was there a message being sent, subtle but unmistakable, to assert control over the event or maintain certain social hierarchies? In spaces like this, where visibility equates to influence, exclusion can be as powerful as recognition. The whispers hinted at a quiet, invisible drama, a story unfolding beneath the glitz and glamour of the gala, a story that few outside the immediate circle would fully understand. The emotional stakes were also rising. Observers noted that Meghan, while outwardly composed, could not entirely hide the subtle tension in her demeanor. The realization that not everyone welcomed her, that some guests questioned her presence, was an invisible pressure pressing against the polished exterior she presented to the world. It's one thing to navigate public scrutiny in controlled settings. It's another entirely to confront a room full of silent judgments, whispers, and covert signals, all happening in real time under flashing cameras. As the whispers grew louder and more persistent, it became clear that the situation was evolving into something larger than a simple question of attendance. There was a collective awareness in the room, an unspoken recognition that this was no ordinary entrance. Some guests felt uncomfortable, caught between their desire to be polite and their curiosity about how the unfolding drama might affect the evening. Others watched with anticipation, sensing that a pivotal moment in the night's narrative was imminent. In such spaces, tension is contagious. Once a few voices begin to question, others follow, consciously or subconsciously, and the energy of the entire room shifts. It was at this point that the whispers reached a crescendo, a near-tangible energy of anticipation and apprehension. Event staff and security personnel began to position themselves more strategically, subtly preparing for an intervention. Photographers and journalists, sensing a developing story, adjusted their angles, trying to capture every possible moment. And Meghan, aware of the heightened scrutiny but still maintaining her composure, continued forward, unknowingly moving toward the moment that would change the course of the evening entirely. In the midst of this charged atmosphere, one thought began to take hold among attendees. Not everyone wanted Meghan there. The whispers had transformed into a collective recognition, a quiet but unmistakable sentiment that her presence was contested, even unwelcome. And as the crowd collectively processed this reality, the tension became almost unbearable. The glamour and excitement of the gala were now inseparable from the uncertainty and drama unfolding before them. Every eye in the room was now watching, not just Meghan, but the interaction between her and the invisible forces resisting her presence. The whispers, once faint, had amplified into a chorus of expectation and speculation. And at that moment, with the entire room on edge, security finally made its decisive move. But what came next would push the night from whispered tension to outright confrontation, and no one present was prepared for it. The moment security stepped forward, the room seemed to hold its collective breath. What had started as whispers and tension suddenly became unmistakable action. Security personnel, who had been observing from the periphery, shifted into a more deliberate formation. Their movements were coordinated, precise, and unmistakably purposeful. To the untrained eye, it may have seemed like routine crowd management, but anyone familiar with high-profile events immediately recognized the signal. Something extraordinary and potentially explosive was about to happen. Meghan Markle, radiant and composed as she had been moments before, now faced an unexpected obstacle. It wasn't a rope, a camera, or an enthusiastic fan blocking her path. It was a coordinated presence of authority, a physical assertion that her access to the gala was being restricted. The security team formed subtle but firm boundaries, gently yet unmistakably guiding her trajectory away from the entrance. The sudden shift caught both attendees and media off guard. Photographers snapped frantically, but many of the most critical moments were blocked from view, obscured by the press and the crowd. The cameras captured flashes of tension, Meghan pausing, slightly startled, then proceeding with measured steps, aware that something unusual had just begun. Insiders later described the interaction as surreal. Security, they explained, did not act aggressively or confrontationally. There was no shouting or public rebuke. Instead, it was clinical, almost businesslike, a series of movements designed to control the situation without creating a scene. But the subtlety of the action only heightened the drama. Observers noted the juxtaposition, Meghan, poised, calm, and elegant, against the invisible force of protocol asserting itself in real time. It was as if a quiet but undeniable current of tension had suddenly rippled through the room, reaching every attendee, every photographer, every guest who had been waiting for a night of celebration. And yet, questions began to swirl immediately. Who had authorized this? Was this an independent decision by the security team, or had someone higher up orchestrated the moment? Rumors circulated even as it happened, whispered between guests. Did they clear her entry with the organizers? Is this some kind of protocol issue? Or is this intentional? In events like these, the line between logistics and power play is often blurred, and every movement is open to interpretation. In that moment, the audience of insiders and onlookers began forming narratives, each influenced by personal perspective, prior knowledge, and the subtle cues they were observing. Meghan, for her part, maintained remarkable composure. Her expression, though slightly tight with surprise, remained dignified. Observers described her movements as deliberate, measured, and strategic, each step calculated to navigate the sudden obstruction while preserving her poise. Yet beneath the calm exterior, there was a visible tension, a subtle awareness that the scenario was anything but ordinary. Imagine standing in a room where every step is scrutinized, where the eyes of the world are upon you, and where forces beyond your control are actively shaping your access to a space. That was the pressure Meghan faced, condensed into a few tense, almost cinematic moments. The reactions of other guests added layers to the drama. Some looked on with visible discomfort, unsure how to respond to the unfolding tension. Others exchanged furtive glances, curiosity and speculation written across their faces. Social media, already primed for real-time updates, began buzzing with fragments of what was happening. Snippets of video, blurry images, hurried tweets. Within minutes, the incident became a trending topic, with viewers dissecting every frame and commenting on every gesture. The whispers from before had transformed into global commentary. The subtle choreography of the security team became increasingly apparent. Each movement was intentional, calculated to assert authority while minimizing overt confrontation. Observers noted how they subtly positioned themselves to create a physical barrier, guiding Meghan along a trajectory that, though polite in appearance, made clear she was not free to access the area she had initially intended to enter. The delicate balance between subtlety and control heightened the emotional stakes. No one wanted a public scene, yet the presence of authority in opposition to Meghan's entrance was impossible to ignore. This was not just about logistics. The symbolism was clear to those attuned to the nuances of social dynamics. In Hollywood, access is power and denial of access even in subtle, orchestrated ways, carries profound implications. The act of security stepping in, regardless of intent, sent a clear message. Here was a figure of immense visibility and influence, yet her presence was being formally, physically questioned. In a space designed to celebrate achievement and inclusion, the gesture reverberated like a quiet declaration of exclusion. At the same time, the emotional tension was palpable. Witnesses described a mixture of sympathy, shock, and curiosity. Meghan's poised demeanor contrasted sharply with the reality of the intervention, creating a powerful visual and emotional tension. Every flash of a camera, every whispered question from attendees, amplified the moment. It was a scene of high drama, punctuated by subtle movements, facial expressions, and the almost imperceptible choreography of the room. Insider reports later revealed the complexity behind the scene. Event organizers were in discreet consultation, debating whether the removal was necessary, what level of public visibility it might entail, and how to handle the fallout. Security personnel were acting in coordination with these discussions, though the details of the chain of authority remain murky. Was this a premeditated decision, a reaction to whispered concerns, or a combination of both? The uncertainty only added to the tension as the guests, the press, and eventually the public tried to interpret actions whose intentions were partially hidden behind protocol and discretion. The emotional stakes for Meghan were immediate. Observers noted subtle micro-expressions of surprise, followed by controlled composure, a delicate balancing act of responding to an unexpected challenge while maintaining public poise. She navigated the subtle barriers with elegance, each movement a testament to her awareness of the situation. Yet the incident carried more than personal implications. It was a visible moment of tension in a space where perception matters more than almost anything else. Each observer, whether guest, staff, or press member, registered not just the physical act, but the emotional weight behind it. And while the cameras captured flashes and blurred frames, the true drama was unfolding in real time. A collision of protocol, perception, and power, all converging on a single figure. The intervention was subtle, yet it spoke volumes. In the world of Hollywood events, where image, access, and influence define success, this moment was unprecedented, a collision between an individual's visibility and the invisible forces that regulate space, privilege, and belonging. But what came next would transform the tension into full-blown spectacle, a moment that would be captured, analyzed, and debated across the globe. No one present anticipated the emotional, social, and cultural reverberations that were about to follow, and no observer could predict how a single act of security intervention could escalate into one of the most talked-about incidents of the evening. The moment security physically intervened, the atmosphere inside the Critics Choice Gala shifted almost instantaneously. A collective, almost imperceptible gasp seemed to ripple through the room, spreading from guest to guest like a silent wave of disbelief. Some people froze mid-step, unsure whether to intervene, avert their gaze, or reach for their phones. Others exchanged hurried glances, whispering questions to one another. Did that just happen? Is she actually being removed? The mixture of shock, curiosity, and discomfort created an electric charge that no one could ignore. For an event meant to celebrate achievement, recognition, and inclusion, the room had suddenly become a theater of tension and unspoken judgment. For those in attendance, it was a surreal moment. Meghan Markle, the poised Duchess of Sussex, was navigating a delicate dance of composure under scrutiny, while the security team, unflinching and deliberate, maintained the boundary that had been set. Guests struggled to reconcile the glamour and excitement of the gala with the unfolding drama. Some were sympathetic, quietly shaking their heads at what they perceived as a harsh and unnecessary act. Others were more judgmental, reading the intervention as a reflection of past controversies or speculated social missteps. In these moments, perception became reality. Even without public comment, opinions solidified, and the room's energy reflected the emotional tension. Meanwhile, photographers and media personnel scrambled to capture every detail, their cameras flashing relentlessly. The flashes punctuated the charged atmosphere, illuminating Meghan's expression, the subtle body language of security personnel, and the reactions of surrounding attendees. Each photo told a story, but it was often fragmented, leaving gaps for interpretation and speculation. By the time the gala's broadcast team began streaming clips and posting highlights online, the moment had already ignited a flurry of commentary. Social media, ever hungry for real-time drama, amplified every second, dissecting the incident frame by frame. The world was watching. On platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, users quickly generated a whirlwind of reactions. Some expressed outrage, condemning the act as humiliating and disrespectful. Comments highlighted Meghan's composure under pressure, praising her for maintaining dignity in the face of public exclusion. Others speculated about the reasons behind the security intervention, suggesting logistical issues, pre-existing protocols, or even behind-the-scenes politics. Memes and GIFs proliferated almost immediately, blending humor, sarcasm, and shock, spreading the story far beyond those physically present at the gala. The incident had become not just a moment of high tension inside a ballroom, but a viral cultural event, amplified by millions of eyes online. The audience reactions inside the gala also evolved rapidly. Some guests approached event staff quietly, seeking clarification or expressing concern. Whispers intensified as more attendees observed the subtle gestures and body language between Meghan and security. Each observation, each whispered speculation, created a domino effect, influencing how others interpreted the situation. Attendees' reactions ranged from empathy to intrigue to thinly veiled judgment. In a space where influence and perception are paramount, every response mattered. The whispers from earlier in the evening had now become audible conversations, filling the room with tension that was both palpable and invisible. Meanwhile, social media commentary intensified as clips and images circulated. Analysts and commentators, both professional and amateur, debated endlessly about intent, context, and consequence. Some highlighted the apparent disparity between Meghan's poise and the authority exerted by security, framing it as an emotional drama that transcended the gala itself. Others questioned the appropriateness of her presence in the first place, creating polarized discussions that mirrored the social divisions subtly reflected in the room. Hashtags began trending, fan communities rallied, and media outlets raced to provide live updates. Within minutes, the narrative had shifted from a private moment in a ballroom to a global spectacle dissected and debated in real time. Inside the room, the tension was further compounded by the reactions of other celebrities. Some guests subtly signaled their support with nods, gentle smiles, or sympathetic glances. Others maintained professional neutrality, carefully avoiding the optics of taking a visible stance. A few whispered conversations were overheard, speculation about who might have orchestrated the intervention and whether it was a formal directive from event organizers or an impromptu decision by security. In Hollywood, access and approval are often intertwined, and the subtle power plays at work in that ballroom were now on full display. The combination of internal reactions and external amplification created a unique dynamic. The gala, designed as a celebration of achievement and inclusion, was now being reframed through the lens of drama, tension, and exclusion. Every action and reaction, the poised movements of Meghan, the deliberate positioning of security, the concerned whispers of guests, was magnified by the public eye, creating a feedback loop that heightened both the emotional and social stakes. It was no longer just an incident at a gala. It was a story unfolding in real time, with millions watching, analyzing, and reacting across the globe. Observers would later describe the scene as cinematic in its intensity. The juxtaposition of elegance and confrontation, poise and authority, silence and speculation, created a narrative tension that few events could replicate. Every flash of a camera, every murmur from a guest, and every social media post contributed to a heightened sense of drama. The room was both literal and figurative stage, each person playing a role in a story whose resolution was not yet visible. And yet, even as the reactions amplified, one critical aspect remained unresolved: the underlying reasons for the intervention. Was this a logistical oversight, a miscommunication, a deliberate act of exclusion? Attendees, media, and the public all wrestled with these questions, seeking clarity in a scenario that offered none. The absence of immediate answers only intensified speculation, fueling the narrative of tension and drama that now dominated both the gala and the broader public conversation. In this charged environment, the incident took on layers of meaning. Some saw it as a personal affront to Meghan, a moment of public humiliation. Others interpreted it as symbolic, a reflection of the complex intersection of fame, royalty, and Hollywood gatekeeping. Regardless of interpretation, the impact was undeniable. The incident had disrupted the intended flow of the gala, transforming an evening of celebration into a story of controversy, power, and emotional intensity. But even as the gasps faded and the social media storm gained momentum, the night was far from over. What happened inside the ballroom next would escalate the tension, draw even more attention, and create a sequence of events that no one in attendance, and no one watching from afar, would ever forget. As the initial shock of Meghan Markle's red carpet confrontation rippled through the gala, the undercurrents of Hollywood politics began to reveal themselves in subtle, yet unmistakable ways. Behind the glitz and glamour, in private hallways and quiet corners away from flashing cameras, whispers turned into discussions, discussions into strategies, and strategies into a delicate balancing act of influence and perception. Hollywood has always been a theater of both performance and power, and last night's incident illuminated the invisible hierarchies that govern access, inclusion, and approval in ways few outsiders ever see. Backstage, the mood was tense. Event organizers huddled with security leads, discussing the unexpected escalation. Their conversation, though hushed, was sharp and urgent. Was the intervention standard protocol, a necessary measure for crowd control, or had someone higher up requested a more deliberate boundary to be drawn? Questions were raised not only about logistics, but also about optics. Every action taken during a high-profile gala is scrutinized, not just in real time by attendees and press, but afterward by millions online. The slightest misstep, whether intentional or not, can ripple outward, becoming fodder for speculation, social media outrage, and headlines. The stakes were extraordinarily high. Within Hollywood's tightly knit circles, the politics surrounding Meghan's presence were complex. She carries a dual identity that few can navigate: global celebrity and former royal. Her life story, media scrutiny, and social influence make her both an asset and a potential liability, depending on the context. At the gala, these dynamics collided with a cultural and industry-specific lens. The Critics Choice Celebration is designed to honor Black cinema and television, a space that celebrates voices historically marginalized by mainstream Hollywood. For some attendees and organizers, Meghan's presence was welcomed as a bridge, an opportunity to draw attention to the event on a global scale. For others, her appearance raised questions about focus, intent, and cultural sensitivity. Was she stepping into a space where she could genuinely contribute, or was her presence perceived as overshadowing the very creators the gala sought to uplift? Sources inside the gala suggested that the tension was not just about Meghan herself, but about larger narratives playing out behind closed doors. Hollywood is rife with unspoken rules: who gets access, who gets recognition, and who decides what constitutes belonging. These rules are often enforced quietly, through whispers, gestures, and subtle positioning, but they carry enormous weight. A single intervention, like the one orchestrated by security, can act as a visual assertion of those rules, signaling to others where boundaries lie. To those attuned to Hollywood politics, the act of restricting Meghan's access was not merely procedural. It was symbolic, loaded with meaning that extended far beyond the ballroom. One particularly revealing aspect was the interplay between long-standing industry power players and the newer, socially connected elite. Some organizers reportedly feared backlash for allowing a figure as high-profile as Meghan unrestricted access. Others worried about being accused of exclusion or gatekeeping if intervention appeared overtly deliberate. Navigating this balance required delicate judgment, strategic communication, and careful orchestration. A reminder that Hollywood politics is as much about perception as it is about action. Every decision had consequences, and the ripple effects would extend far beyond the gala itself. Celebrities in attendance were not immune to this dynamic. Many observed the tension, speculated about motives, and adjusted their behavior accordingly. Some quietly signaled support to Meghan through glances or gestures. Others maintained cautious neutrality, and a few seemed to relish the drama as an opportunity to align themselves with one side or the other in an invisible power play. In high-profile spaces, public perception is inseparable from private action. Who you stand near, who you whisper to, and even how you react to unexpected situations can influence your standing in subtle but critical ways. The ballroom had become a theater not just for recognition, but for status, influence, and strategic positioning. The interplay of Hollywood politics and security intervention also highlighted the role of insider knowledge. A handful of attendees, familiar with the behind-the-scenes machinations of awards shows, recognized the signs of a carefully controlled scenario. From the coordinated positioning of personnel to the rapid flow of private communications, these insiders could see the threads of influence being woven in real time. For them, the event was both a spectacle and a case study in power dynamics, a reminder that Hollywood's glittering exterior often conceals intricate networks of negotiation, hierarchy, and control. Meanwhile, social media commentary mirrored the complexity unfolding inside the gala. Analysts, entertainment reporters, and fans speculated about the politics behind Meghan's confrontation, drawing connections to previous controversies, media narratives, and cultural considerations. Every post, comment, and tweet became a layer in the unfolding story, reflecting public fascination with both the visible drama and the invisible forces that shaped it. The incident was no longer contained to the ballroom. It had expanded into a global conversation about power, privilege, and perception in one of the world's most influential entertainment industries. The emotional undertones of these politics were equally significant. For Meghan, the tension was not simply a matter of logistics. It was an unspoken confrontation with cultural expectations, social dynamics, and industry hierarchies. She had to navigate a space where visibility could be both empowering and perilous, where every expression and movement was under scrutiny, and where exclusion could be both subtle and profound. Observers later remarked on her ability to maintain composure despite the weight of these intersecting pressures, a testament to her experience in navigating high-stakes public situations. At the same time, the incident highlighted the delicate balance organizers must maintain between authority and diplomacy. Security, event coordinators, and influential attendees had to manage not only the immediate situation but also the potential fallout. Any misstep could spark controversy, damage reputations, or ignite further tension among attendees. In this environment, every action was magnified, every decision scrutinized, and the margin for error was almost non-existent. The room became a microcosm of Hollywood politics itself, a complex ecosystem of power, perception, and influence, where control and optics are inseparable. And yet, despite the careful orchestration, uncertainty remained. Even as whispers and speculation intensified, no one had fully anticipated the next development, the escalation that would turn a tense moment into an unforgettable spectacle. The interplay of authority, perception, and personal presence was about to reach a climax, one that would challenge assumptions, provoke debate, and dominate headlines. The drama was far from over, and the world was about to witness the consequences of Hollywood politics colliding with global celebrity in a very public way. But what came next would not only heighten the tension, it would ignite a chain of reactions that no one, inside or outside the gala, could have predicted. Behind the flashes of cameras and the murmurs of the crowd, Meghan Markle's experience at the Critics Choice Celebration of Black Cinema and TV Gala was profoundly personal, layered with emotion, and, according to insiders, far more complex than what the public initially perceived. While the room buzzed with whispers, speculation, and social media commentary, those closest to her described a mixture of incredulity, frustration, and composure that defined her response to an unprecedented situation. To understand the full scope of what happened, it is essential to consider the perspective of Meghan herself, as well as the accounts of those who witnessed the events from within the inner circle. Sources close to Meghan revealed that she entered the gala expecting the same warm reception afforded to other high-profile attendees. She had been invited to celebrate a night that honors Black cinema and television, and she approached it with the same intention as any other guest: to be present, to engage respectfully, and to show support for the artists being recognized. Her excitement, however, was tempered by awareness of her own public profile, royal lineage, Hollywood experience, and ongoing media scrutiny, all factors that naturally amplify attention and, sometimes, criticism. The delicate balance of confidence and caution she maintained was a conscious strategy, honed over years of navigating high-pressure public environments. Immediately upon entering the red carpet area, Meghan sensed the subtle shifts in energy that would later escalate into confrontation. According to eyewitness accounts, she noted the tension in the staff, the quiet communications among security personnel, and the whispered exchanges between attendees. These cues, though understated, were unmistakable to someone attuned to the dynamics of high-profile events. Sources reported that Meghan initially tried to maintain focus on the celebration itself, engaging politely with photographers and select attendees while consciously navigating the undercurrent of scrutiny. Her awareness of the delicate balance between presence and perception was evident in every movement and gesture. As the security team began to position themselves, Meghan reportedly experienced a mixture of surprise and disbelief. While she is accustomed to public attention and controlled scrutiny, the deliberate, almost formal intervention was an unexpected deviation from normal protocol. According to sources, she paused momentarily, scanning the room to assess the situation, before continuing with measured steps. It was, insiders emphasized, a moment of high tension that tested both composure and emotional resilience. Observers noted subtle facial expressions, micro-expressions of concern, brief glances, and controlled posture that reflected the internal negotiation between reaction and strategy. Those close to Meghan also noted her immediate thought process during the incident. She reportedly considered several possibilities simultaneously. Was this a procedural security matter, a miscommunication among organizers, or a deliberate attempt to assert authority and limit her presence? Navigating these questions in real time, in front of cameras and an influential audience, required rapid mental and emotional processing. Sources described her approach as both strategic and instinctive, maintaining dignity and poise while subtly evaluating options for next steps.